to bring greater awareness?
One of the great myths, I think, that Middle East experts continue to parrot is that Iran is a lot stronger than we think. Potter Stewart, the Supreme Court Justice, said that censorship reflects a society's lack of confidence in itself. And by any measure, Iran is a country which does not allow freedom of speech, which does not allow freedom of assembly, which does not allow freedom of religion. It is a regime based on imposition, and any regime that forces its ideas upon its people is one that is profoundly insecure. And so not long ago, I spoke at Google to leading online activists in the Middle East, and I said, with all due respect, you guys have a serious problem. You have the most powerful tools ever known to man. With the click of a button, you can reach literally millions of people, and yet there is not a single American in a million that knows any one of your names. And if they don't know your names, they don't care about you enough, and if they don't care about you enough, your fate is sealed. All of this, I believe, is deeply interconnected. The more we highlight the individuals' names and faces who bear the brunt of the repression of the Iranian theocratic dictatorship, the better off we will be and the better off they will be. And so I think when we look at Iran, our intentions have to be clear. Not accommodation with the regime, not appeasement of the regime, but the regime must end up as the Soviet regime did, on the ash heap of history. We must transcend the regime, and it must be replaced with one that is representative of the people and respects human rights. We need to hold true to Jefferson's dictum to swear eternal hostility over all forms of tyranny over the mind of man, and particularly the West and free nations need to ally with those whom the Iranian regime fears most, and that is their own people. Thanks so much.
The Teamsters Union represents about 1.4 million hardworking men and women throughout North America, but our fight for working people extends beyond our borders. There's one country that, as you know, represses labor with near impunity, and that's Iran. Whether it's petrochemical workers, most recently, teachers, bus drivers, the list can go on. We have found that Iran has no consideration for the needs or cares for its workers. Members and leaders still remain jailed. The fact is, though, the same blocks that build the labor movement are the same blocks that build democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of association, the ability to organize, economic independence, and the freedom to choose. The world saw these components come together in other Middle Eastern countries such as Egypt and Tunisia. Iran simply cannot be overlooked. That is why the Teamsters Union, along with the International Transport Federation and other transportation unions from around the world, are continuing to defend the rights of workers in Iran and across the globe. And I think it's also why it's important that we continue to raise these issues in the context as we are today of not just on our own discussing labor, or on our own discussing religion, or on our own discussing other violations of human rights, but to come together and realize that this is one oppressive regime that is harming all of our rights and all of the rights of the people of Iran, and that we cannot ignore it any longer. Thank you.
We've heard from a great cross-section, a great panel this morning, and representing the Christian church, I really found from our Baha'i friend a great description of what religious minorities are facing under this incredibly oppressive regime. David has encouraged us to zero in and focus on faces and focus on names. Let me do that briefly with you this morning. 2 or 3 highlights. Many of you have heard of Pastor Yusuf Nadarkhani, who's been in the news quite a bit of late. His crime, capital crime that he's been on trial for his life, is, of course, his conversion from Islam to Christianity. He's been imprisoned, he's been taken from his family, he's been on trial for his life. And then into this process, the government, understanding some of the pressures that David shared with us that could be placed on this, all of a sudden changed the charges. The charges were no longer focusing on the apostasy issue. The charges were now Zionism, rape, and extortion. So halfway through his political process, they just, renamed his charges so that he could perhaps be more easily assailed in that way. We all know the problem. We are all bombarded with this problem. You're here because you're aware of the problem. And if we could draw concentric circles around the very diverse spheres of influence that we represent this morning, we could get something done about the problem. We could make some noise. I would encourage minds much smarter than mine to begin to blueprint for us when and what will be the trigger moments where we need to have a plan that moves past words into genuine actions that hold this despotic, tyrannical regime accountable for its actions, so that its representative leader will never again want to come to New York. Thank you.